Welcome to today's lecture on nutrition and absorption. So last time we talked about the digestive system and we focused on the tube that starts with your mouth, runs through everything else and goes out your anus. But today we're going to talk more about what really happens in that tube. And to talk about that, we need to start with some of the organs that are not part of that tube, but are important for putting things into that tube and taking things out of that tube. So I'm going to start by talking about the liver. We talked a little bit about the liver before when we talked about the circulatory system. The liver is important for blood filtration, just like the kidney. It's important for removing toxins and things like that. And the liver has a unique circulatory pattern, which is that along with the hepatic arteries, where blood is coming in from the descending aorta and going directly, and we also have the portal vein. In the portal vein, blood comes from the intestines, particularly the small intestine, and goes into the liver, not going directly back to the heart, but first going into the liver, where it is processed through the liver to remove a bunch of the stuff that it has collected and start the process of storing carbohydrates and things like that, and also filter out toxins before it goes back into the hepatic vein, where it will then be carried up into the vena cava and back into the heart. So that's sort of our structure. We also have, you'll notice, coming out this hepatic duct, and these hepatic ducts are going to carry bile both directly into the duodenal ampulla and into the gallbladder where it can be stored. So looking in more detail into the liver, these are liver lobules. These are sets of hepatic cells organized into these lobules, these structures. And looking at them, you can see these hepatic cells forming these nice lines with the portal blood running through this, and then the bile ductules coming out carrying bile that's produced by these individual cells. And the cells themselves are hepatocytes. Hepata means liver, so liver cells. And they have distinct shapes where they have a basal surface along a membrane, a lateral surface that presses against other cells, and then apical surface with these little microvilli that stick out and again provide that extra surface area, very similar to what we saw in the small intestine. And these all fit together to form these liver lobules. And these liver lobules then, do all of this function, produce the bile, and create this whole structure. Now, the liver, as I said, one of its major roles is filtering toxins out of this portal blood that is coming in from the intestines and everything absorbed in the intestines. Now, that means that the liver is constantly exposed to these toxins. One of the key ones, of course, being alcohol. The liver is where alcohol is first processed, and too much of certain toxins, including alcohol, coming in can start killing off cells in the liver. But the liver is actually incredibly good at healing and repairing itself, to the degree that you can do a partial liver transplant from a living person, hook it up in someone whose liver has gone bad, and it will regrow into a full liver. However, if there's too much damage, you can get scarring. And when you have scarring, the liver is still going to try and regrow, but it'll regrow in these nodules, these lumps, and that's what we call cirrhosis. So cirrhosis, it most famously happens in the case of alcoholism. So repeated high levels of alcohol causing damage and scarring to the liver result in cirrhosis. You can also get cirrhosis from certain diseases that affect the liver, like hepatitis. And you can also get cirrhosis from fatty liver disease, where excess and badly processed fat builds up in the liver and causes scarring. So this is, the sort of long-term liver damage where your liver is trying to rebuild around this scarring. And so then we come back to this bile. So you had bile that was being produced by these cells. Now you should remember that bile, we're talking about a few different things, but the key one is bile salts. Hopefully from that enzymes lab, we're going to be bringing that enzymes lab back a lot this time. That enzymes lab, bile salts are important for fat digestion. We'll come back to that shortly. But that bile some of it is secreted directly into the duodenal ampulla, and some of it goes back here and is stored in the gallbladder. Now the gallbladder is just a storage sac. It's a bag that stores that bile. And so when you eat a large quantity of fatty food, the gallbladder will contract and squeeze out large quantities of that bile to help with digestion. Now, the gallbladder can develop gallstones. So gallstones happen when fat and bile salts crystallize and become these rocks that build up and can't get out of the gallbladder. This can be extremely painful, it's disruptive, and in many cases, this results in us actually having to remove the gallbladder. Now, you can live without a gallbladder because the liver will continue secreting the bile directly. However, it does mean that if you don't have a gallbladder and you eat a lot of fatty food, you won't be able to, all at once, you won't be able to process all of those fats. And that tends to result in diarrhea, as unprocessed fats need to go out somewhere. So someone who has had their gallbladder removed will need to limit the amount of fat they eat at one sitting. Over time, the body tends to adapt, producing more bile and actually starting to store it in a widening of that ampulla area, that duct. So this tends to become less important over time, but it will always be the case to some degree. If you've had your gallbladder out, you're always going to need to be more careful about the quantity of fat you consume at one sitting. The other important accessory organ to the digestive system is the pancreas. So in the past, we've mostly talked about the pancreas's endocrine function, so the hormones of the pancreas, insulin and glucagon. But most of the pancreas is actually devoted to the exocrine function, producing digestive enzymes. So the pancreas produces these digestive enzymes that go down the pancreatic duct into the common bile duct and into the duodenal ampulla. So that will join up with where the bile is being secreted from the common bile duct. And so we see this pancreatic duct. There's an accessory pancreatic duct where some comes out, but most of it is going to go right out through this joint duct into the duodenal ampulla and be released into the duodenum, this first portion of the small intestine. And that's going to secrete pancreatic enzymes for digesting all of the things that are coming through. That's where most of those digestive enzymes in the small intestine come from.